Hi friends, welcome back to Arc Tutorials. This is Angular 10 full tutorial series for absolute beginners. In today's episode, we are going to learn about templates in components. It's a very basic fundamental thing that a beginner should be aware of. A lot of times I've seen most of the tutorials or the series that covers, including mine in Angular 9, I've covered directly interpolation, data binding, directives, and a lot of you have asked me like, can you explain what is the basic template in component? How do we customize it? How do we change it? So that's when I realized that, probably I should create a quick tutorial on templates to help the absolute beginners to understand how the template system works in component. This is part 16 of the Angular 10 full complete tutorial playlist. I have planned around 100 tutorials for you in this series. So make sure that you keep checking the description box below because that's where I'll update the notes and the code. So far we have covered all these topics that you're seeing on your screen. Make sure that you have gone through each of that so you have continuity in your learning, as well as you will cover each and every topic and master it thoroughly. Okay, so today we are focusing on learning about templates in Angular components. So we will learn about what are templates in components, what are the different ways to include templates in components, and how do you style your components, right? This is absolutely basic kind of ABC kind of a stuff in Angular and components. So let's get started. Alrighty, so this is this is what the application that we have and that we are building in this particular series, which is a simple CRM tool which will have contacts, leads, profile settings, and authentication, right? Nothing fancy, but I'm sure at the end of this particular application building, you will understand how a real-time application is done, including each and every features. All right, so let's get started. I do it in every episode. I will let's make some notes. This is episode number 16. Today we are learning about templates in Angular components. Right. So we have seen that whenever we generate a component, it will come with 4 files, right? So whenever we generate a component, it would have 4 files, right? So you'll have a template file which is nothing but your .html file, right? And you have a style.css which is your style sheet, right? And then you have your class file, right, which is nothing but your .component.ts file, .ts file. And then you will have template style, and then you have your spec file. This is nothing but spec file. So this is a testing file, right? So whenever you see spec.ts, you know that it's a test file, unit test. It's important to call it out unit test because there is also something called E2E that I have explained earlier. So if you have missed it, please check it out. Alright, so these are the 4 files that any of these components that we generate comes with. So now take a look here. So this is a leads listing page that we are working, and when we generated this component, it gave component.html, CSS, spec, and component.ts, right? So now a lot of you have also asked, why is it difference that I have SCSS, you have CSS? This is totally based on the choice that you selected earlier at ins at installing Angular app, right? Now if you selected SCSS, which is SAS based, you would see all the style sheets ending with .scss. If you selected normal CSS, you would see ending with .css, right? So make sure that if you see some discrepancy, it's okay, as long as you're comfortable with whichever format of the CSS that you have used, right? Now let's open the default .component.html, right? So this is the default. Now the reason I'm just writing it here is because this will be the component name at the starting. Component name .html. So when you open it, it says it works, right? App listings works. That's what it would tell you most of the times, right? So it will say it works. That's the basic output of any component, right? And how is it related? So the relationship is in the component.ts file, right? Now here I'll again let me write it down. dot component dot ts file name, right? So open that file. Now here you would see something important. This is the component decorator, right? This is a component decorator. Now what a decorator is nothing but it will give you information, right? So what is a decorator, right? So it gives definition and meaning to the you can say that this is the definition of this instance, right? So if you are saying your component, it will have a definition which will say it will have a selector, template URL, and style URL, right? So these are the three things that make up this component decorator, right? Any decorator that starts with at the rate, right? So that's what it starts with. It has prefix of at the rate. Okay, so let's stick to component template that we are learning now. This is the particular thing. So here we see an important thing which says app leads listing, right? So whenever you generate a component, by default Angular will add app in as prefix. So your selector is nothing but your app followed by your component name. So in this case it would be leads listing, right? Now what is a selector? Now selector is nothing but, think of it like a unique identifier to identify this component, right? So now each of this component will have a unique selector. Now this is the one which you will use to add it in your anywhere in your HTML or any other component. That is what will be used. And how do we use it? So we will write tag like this. Now this means that you are calling this particular component, right? I'll show you that also in just a bit. Just hold on to that thought for now. All right. So now this is how the selectors are done. Now a lot of times people ask in interviews also, can you change the default app prefix? What will happen, right? What will happen if I change, right? Will your application work? Will it crash, right? Will your app work or will it crash, right? So these are common basic things in interviews. They ask you to kind of test whether you have working knowledge or not. So the answer is yes. Yes, we can we can change it, and we can change it throughout the app, right? So in the configuration we can say that we don't want the default to be app, we want something to be, let's say, nx or ngx or whatever you want, right? To, or say arc tutorials, right? Anything you want, that it has no restriction. By default it is app, but you can always change it to any name we want, right? And what will happen if we change it? Nothing will happen, right? Absolutely, right? Nothing happens. Nothing happens. Only thing that we need to check is that you change it everywhere wherever you have used it, right? Basically, wherever you have changed it, make sure you update it. Make sure you update with latest info, right? That's the only restriction. Will your app work or will it crash? If you have updated all the necessary places with the newly updated prefix, up necessary components with latest prefix, it will work. Okay, so the whole idea is this is just a configuration, we can always change it. Okay, now where do we change this app thing? Let me show you that also real quick before we jump into template part. So see, this is very basic, very basic. A lot of people think that it's not covered anywhere else, because I feel that these are important things that you should know, so I'm covering each and everything. So go to angular.json, you would see something called prefix, right? Now you change it, let's say arc tutorials, and generate your application. Now your components will have this prefix, right? Is it required? No. Is it compulsory to use app? No, right? So that's your answer basically. So where will you change it? Go to angular.json, change prefix. That's it. right? So that was about your selector, right? I will continue explaining it. Let's see in detail. The next thing that you would see is in your component.ts, you would see template URL and style.url. So this is extremely important. You will see template URL and you would see styles URL. Now see the difference. The first difference, obvious thing is styles URL is an array, right? Which means it will take more than one styling, right? That means it can take more than one styling. It can take multiple styles sheets as input, right? It can be one or more. That's what array means. Can be one or more style sheets, right? Now template is always one single HTML file, right? Now there are two flavors to it, right? Now remember this. Either now see, let me break it down, right? So now templates in components can be used two ways, right? One is two ways of using templates. Templates in components, right? So first way is using template URL, where you will pass a single URL or link the HTML file. The other way is to just pass the template itself. That means instead of a HTML file, you will pass the entire template itself as input. Let me show you here how. So now here you will say template. Here we will pass the template itself instead of file, instead of a HTML file, right? So that's the two ways of using templates in component, right? Let me show you here in add contact. So now this is your HTML file, which is this link which says add contact works, right? Now that's a template URL. Now I don't have a template URL, I don't have a file. So what we can do is we can just write template, delete all of this and just put backtick. Now backtick is nothing but, for this remember, we will use backtick and not single quotes. A lot of you have made this mistake in Angular 9. Backtick will be found, backtick key can be found on left top's side, right? Left side top, under this operator, right? So you would see some operator like this, right? So make sure that you get that. That's the top, next to one usually, right? So make sure you get that right. Now in the component you will write backtick and then write your actual HTML code itself, what you want. So see, now we don't have a HTML file, but it's just a pure template itself. Now what is a template? It's nothing but it's just HTML code, right? Now we will pass the template itself instead of HTML file, and it means we just pass the HTML code. That's simple as that, that we want the component to display, right? We just, that's as simple as that, right? Now having said, I hope you are clear with all of this component and everything, and it's time to get into hands-on. Let me show you the demo with all these things that we have learned so far, right? So let's do some hands-on examples, so that way it will be absolutely clear to you before we jump into other advanced topics like directives, data binding, interpolation, pipes, etc. All right, let's get started. Again, if you have any doubts, please drop me a note at surya.aradhya@gmail.com. And remember friends, please support me by liking, comment, subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much again. Let's jump into the hands-on examples. First, let me start the application, and you start the application by typing the command ng serve. Okay, so once you have done it, now let's go here And so I'm not going to create any more components so that you don't have any confusion, but I will keep it absolutely simple for you. So what we will do, we will be using the profile module, right? So we have a profile module that we created in the modules tutorial. Please make sure that you check it out. All right. So once you have that, now let's go ahead and I will show it here. Localhost and simple CRM. So you have the localhost 4200, which is giving a simple CRM. Now what we'll do, we will create a new component, right? And we are going to say cd simple crm and ng generate component, or I'm instead of easy way to do it is go into the particular folder where you have and into the module. I've gone into the module which is the profile, and here I'm saying ng generate component. I'm saying list profile, right? Simple component list profile. This is my component, and you see I have done it in purpose because I don't want to confuse the new beginner, new fresh readers who are joining us in this episode. So they will also know that these are the files that I just generated right now. Okay. All right. So we have it here. So we have the list profile component. You see here it has all the 4 files, right? So now the first thing we learned is that component, it has the component works. So you just go there, it says list profile works, right? That's what is in the default HTML. That's what we learned. Then it will also have a component.ts, which is here list profile.component.ts. Then I told you there will be a decorator, which will be component, right? Which will have a selector name, which will be unique name followed by the app prefix, right? So you go to component, you will see app hyphen list hyphen profile, right? That's your selector unique ID. Now it's not an ID, you can just say call it as a unique name for this component, right? Then you have template URL, which is list to your HTML, link to your HTML. You have your SCSS, which is your style URL, right? So that's basically all the files that are auto generated. You can see it here, and you can see that these are all auto generated and your module is also updated. Okay. So far so good, right? Now let's see what then we saw. Then we learned that there are 2 ways to add templates, right? So let's see that. So I'm going to take this, right? And what we'll do is we'll throw it in the app component. I'm going to add it in the app component like this. And I told you how do you add it? You just add by the selector name. That way it becomes your element, right? But since we have added it into the module, we need to import that, right? So what we'll have to do is we have to include the profile module. Okay. So this is getting little tricky because we'll have to cover routing and everything, but I will still do it for you here. But if you don't understand this part, it's okay. Okay. So don't worry. Or you know, or let me just keep it simple for you, right? If you can understand, let's take the same example, do it in app component, right? So this is also same, nothing complicated. Go to app component and you have it here. So here what we'll do, we have our template URL, we have our styles URL, right? Let's see what our notes we did. So we can use template or we can use template URL. So here let's just use the template. Okay, so we'll use a template, and I told you we can use backtick h1 followed by h1, and here we are simply going to say title. Okay, so far so good, nothing fancy, nothing complicated. All right, so let's see our in our application. So it says title, but we want to display the actual title, so we are going to use something called interpolation. Okay, so now you see it says simple CRM. So I have not used the template URL, but instead I have used the template itself, but it still works, right? So what you know is absolutely you can use template URL or you can use template, it doesn't matter, right? As for styles, again, we can use anything that we want, right? So let me go here. I'll put this back to template URL. Okay, and style URLs is nothing but you can pass multiple style sheets here, and you can create a new style sheet here and pass that also. So this is let's put it back here. I'm going to give a class name and say C1 here, and in my CSS I'm going to add C1 and say background color whatever, right? Right, so you see that's how the CSS is related to this component, right? So you have your component style where we added SCSS, the style sheet, and we have our HTML, which is our template, and this app root, right, which is a selector which is in our index.html. If you see here, app root. Now I told you we can change the selector name, so let's do that, right? So now what will happen is there will be no output, because in your index.html you are telling load the selector which is app-root, but the selector name that we have is arc tutorials root, right? Copy this, come to index, and then again now put this directive which is arc-tutorials-root, and now you'll see this back. So now I am sure at least you have got a complete understanding of how template works here, how this whole things are related in terms of the template in a component, right? You would be able to understand relationship between HTML, CSS, component TS, and style.scss, right? So all these files are now you can see the relationship, and that's how they're all interlinked for working. All right, I hope this gives you a complete understanding of templates in component, because this is absolutely important for us to start the next episode, which is directives in Angular. Thank you so much for joining. I look forward to hearing your doubts, your queries, your feedback. If you like this video, give a thumbs up. Please do like, share, comment, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for joining. I'll see you in the next episode where we learn about directives in Angular. Thank you so much.